In the summer of 1875, a ragged group of starved Comanche Indians staggered into Fort Sill in present-day Oklahoma. These were the final steps of the Comanches' empire across the Great Plains, which spanned 150 years and stunted the westward expansion of the governments of the United States, Mexico, France, and the Republic of Texas. Over the 40 years before 1875, the Comanche had won major victories against the U.S. soldiers using expert horsemanship and archery, which defied the logic of the Anglo settlers. It's been said that the West was not won until the Comanche lost it, and the Great Plains were only subdued upon their defeat. Though now in a new life at Fort Sill, they carried with them fonder memories of riding under wide-open skies on horseback as they followed the now nearly extinct American bison across the plains. But even as the Comanche lost the war to the Americans, they gained the respect and nobility of many, for their ruthlessness and the charm of their free life was never forgotten. The Comanche were without question the fiercest fighters that the Anglo settlers ever faced. No other group of indigenous peoples were ever able to so effectively repel, terrorize, and thwart the settling of their ancestral lands. After centuries of war with other native peoples, the Comanche culture was entirely oriented around warfare. For that reason, the Comanche have been called the Spartans of the American plains, owing to their martial and warfare society. Though their society was small in number, they were not centralized by any one political or religious leader. Instead, Comanches traveled in bands of varying size. Some bands consisted of only one camping family, while other bands consisted of hundreds of people. These bands were ruled by family chieftains, and whenever more than one chieftain was present, they together appointed a temporary ruler, with other chiefs serving as an advisory council. The men of the Comanche society were almost exclusively engaged in war, raiding, and hunting. The Comanche war parties that ravaged western settlements on the plains were a nuisance to the Texans, the Spanish, the French, and the Americans for years, and it was this threat that turned back the Spanish and the French from their original western claims in North America. It was said of the Comanche that they would shoot from their bows while hanging on the side of their horse and would fire arrows in alarming succession. The weapons of the frontiersmen were initially not able to keep up with such speed and did not have a way to match the skill of the Comanche on their horses. This all began to change in the mid-19th century with the advent of the Texas Rangers and their counterstrike campaigns on the Comanche. At first, the Rangers had just as many problems as the other settlers when fighting on their frontier. One of the reasons why the Comanche were so difficult to defeat was their mobility while fighting on horseback and the degree to which they could outfire the guns of their opponents. Rangers at this time only carried 2 single-shot pistols and 1 Kentucky long rifle, which granted them a total of 3 shots against the Comanche before needing to reload on foot, as this could not be done on horseback. In contrast, the Comanche, upon surviving an initial volley from the Rangers, were able to litter their opponents with arrows at the speed of up to 15 arrows per minute. The Rangers employed other tactics of the Comanche against them, such as cold camps without fires and guerrilla tactics, but they were always at a disadvantage in battle. It was only after the invention of the first Colt revolver in 1836 that the Comanche advantage began to dissolve on the plains. These guns were unique in their ability to hold 6 shots before reloading in their later models and 5 shots in the initial models. Though obviously useful to the Rangers, these firearms were not appreciated or produced in mass before being discovered by a Texas Ranger, Jack Coffee Hayes. Hayes, along with the other Rangers, immediately recognized their utility against the Comanches. They knew that the potential to fire 5 additional shots before reloading might put the advantage on their side for the first time. Their first opportunity to use these weapons against the Comanche came in the summer of 1844 at the Battle of Walker's Creek. In this battle, Hayes, with 15 of his fellow Rangers, were trailed by Comanche, who then attacked in full with their war band of around 75 mounted warriors. The Rangers, putting their confidence in their new Colt revolvers, charged, and fighting soon ensued at the top of a hill. With the use of their new revolvers, the Rangers were able to drive the Comanche away from their hilltop position and pursued them over 3 miles in a retreat. The final result of the battle was around 23 dead and 30 wounded Comanche, with only 1 dead and 4 wounded Rangers. This incredible and lethal result, which the revolver effected in battle, would change the power dynamic and lead to a prolonged war that would see the end of Comanche dominance on the plains. Though the Comanche fought hard in the coming years, the technological advancement of the Anglo settlers was not the only thing that would play against them. In 1869, the Union Pacific Railroad was joined to the Central Pacific Railroad, uniting for the first time the east and west coasts of the Union by rail. The new line of settlers into the Great Plains from the south, as well as the north, continued the encroachment onto Comanche territory and inserted hundreds of new settlers, forts, and outposts into their country. The most significant result of this was a drastic uptick in the bison pelt trade, where suddenly the 30 to 60 million bison in the American plains in 1865 were reduced to almost 500 by 1884. This was the largest killing of warm-blooded animals in recorded history. It was not merely to create more wealth in the sale of hides and meat, but in fact was a ploy of the U.S. government to starve out the Plains Indians. Between 1872 and 1874, approximately 5,000 bison were killed every single day. The government incentive to kill bison, compounded with a drought in the mid-19th century and more native nations being forced onto the plains, nearly exterminated the species. As a result of this, the Comanche, among other plains nations, lost their ability to survive on the plains. Their way of life and their freedom were soon to follow. By the 1870s, most Comanche bands who still roamed were on the verge of either starvation or surrender. Still, there were bands who held out against the Anglo settlers, of which the strongest was the Cohati Comanches. These had been isolated from all interactions with whites, protecting them from the plague, and were renowned as the fiercest band of all Comanches, and led by the last great chief of the Comanche named Quanah Parker. The final struggle between the Union and the Comanche was launched in the summer of 1874. The Red River War, as it was later called, was intended by the U.S. Army to force the Comanche, among other Plains Indians, onto reservation land. Enraged by the forced removal of their people, the bison extermination, and past wars, the Cohati band, led by the half-white chief Quanah Parker, were prompted by a medicine man prophet named Isa Tai to strike an Anglo outpost at Adobe Walls. This place had been the site of a previous battle where the Comanche and their allies had repelled Kit Carson's 300-man expedition in 1864. With this auspicious victory in their memory, the Comanche moved to take the outpost and repel the settlers again. Though the Cohatis now outnumbered their opponents 300 to 28, the settlers at Adobe Walls took defensive positions behind their palisade and were able to hold off the Comanche assault. Following this, the U.S. Army made bigger plans to remove the Comanche from their land and onto the reservation. They moved in 5 troop columns into the Texas Panhandle region, hoping to encircle and force the surrender of the remaining Comanche bands in the area. Many of these bands, seeing their end in sight, ran further into the plains for one last gasp of their traditional way of life. Over the course of 20 engagements with the Comanche in the Red River War, the U.S. Army devastatingly defeated the remnant of the once great empire on the plains. In June 1875, the last of the Comanche, led by Quanah Parker, entered the walls of Fort Sill in present-day Oklahoma. His band, the Coyotes, were the last Comanches to come in from the plains, and though Quanah and his nation would endure on the reservation, the Comanche would never ride free on the plains again.